He does like to play that Olaf. He does have a lot of junglers that are strong in terms of the early game and can look to punish it. So instead, Schalke are locking in a strong AD carry for upset very early.
And I would say that Schalke actually have a higher priority on something like a Sejuani than Rogue do, although since you already have a melee champion like Aatrox, we talk all the time how well Sejuani works with champions like Aatrox, locks them down, allows them to do all of that damage, close onto backlines. So I'm actually curious if, because it's an insta-lock Aatrox, that Sejuani's priority actually climbs for Rogue.
We'll see if Rogue does decide to lock it in. Right now, they're going to pick a safe mid laner for Larssen. Corki is one of his staple picks. He does so well in those matchups where he has a little bit of extra range, can just get a large CS lead coming into the mid game.
Should come as no surprise, the Corki pick, it was something that he often picked into Abbedagge. Last week when he played up against Humanoid on the Akali, and it was fairly safe in the 1 versus 1. Once you start moving out to side lanes, it can be a little bit harder. What does surprise me is Rogue going for the Kaisa. Now, typically Kaisa is considered a safe blind pick, but by locking it into the Lucian, you are intentionally giving yourself a losing matchup. But what we saw a lot of from Rogue last week was Inspired playing around the bot lane in the early stages of play. He did it in the game with the Garen Yuumi, he did the same thing with the Kog'Maw Tahm Kench, and I feel like that's going to be the direction that Rogue look to take this game to try and help Woolite and Vander through what could be a rough laning phase.
And now there's that Sejuani pick that we were talking about, so I expect that Schalke need to double down and start pinching on the jungle pool, taking away things like the Olaf as it hits the ban phase, so that Inspired doesn't get a comfort pick and can't contest Trick in that jungle.
And the question is where Inspired will go with that Sejuani being locked away, with the Olaf being banned away as well. There are things like the Skarner, like the Elise, but those are lesser known picks for him. And I think the question really becomes, how are Rogue going to mitigate some of the disadvantages they have in these lanes? Because you talked about it, Vedius. You need something that will help Woolite in that bottom lane against upset on this Lucian.
Right now, I'm looking at some of the supports that are up and available. Braum is something that's very popular over in the LCK and is always something you have to respect when a Lucian has already been locked in. But the likes of Rakan is still up and available as well. And we do know that IgNar likes to play those engaged pick style supports. So you've always got to be conscientious of things like a Blitzcrank. And with the Alistar banned away, it's always something that you have to have in the back of your mind. Will they save that support pick for last to ensure the strongest possible 2v2 for the bot side of Schalke?
It's not something we too commonly see, but Schalke might decide that that is their best method of action here. Waiting on their next pick with the Alistar and the Renekton banned away in that last phase of ban.
Yeah, just hard doubling down on taking away any sort of option for Odo into that top side. I do like the Kled. We talked at length how that Kled Aatrox matchup works, although we need to point out that that Corki could still technically be flexed up into the top side. We've seen that played as well.
True.
So I actually like the fact that Odo is going with a safer pick like a Gnar that has the range instead of kind of the counter Grievous Wounds matchup, because you're not quite sure what Rogue are going to do with the flexibility that they have in draft.
I also think it would be very brave to pick Kled into someone who was known as a Kled one-trick when he was in solo queue before he got onto Rogue. He's been so good at it, has Finn. But here is going to be the Gnar into Aatrox matchup in the top lane, and that looks like it's going to be a jungle Sylas coming out from Inspired.
So Sylas makes a lot of sense into the likes of Sejuani, a very easy ultimate to steal and gives you that great engage tool later on into the game as well. You have strong early skirmishing, and while you're not the most effective early ganker, you can still be very reliable. Now, we did talk briefly about Rakan. It was very much what we expected when paired up with the Kaisa. Now I'm looking at IgNar and thinking, what does he have prepared? Will we see something like the Thresh? Will we see the Braum locked in to pair it up? Or will we go for something a little bit more aggressive? Remember that Pantheon, of course, is disabled on our playoffs patch, so he will not be locked in.
This is another option, though. We have seen that before, but you called for it, Vedius. You wanted something aggressive. Leona for IgNar in the bot lane. Think back 2 years to when he made his name on this champion against Misfits in the World Championship, beating out that bot lane at level 2. We'll see how much of that previous IgNar he can bring here today.
So something that I like about the Leona versus something like a Lux pick, yes, we've always talked about how Lux is able to counteract Rakan because Rakan dashes towards you. It allows a very easy light binding. But something that Leona offers that a Lux struggles a little bit with is also roam potential. Leona can make a huge impact onto the mid lane, and when you're facing a guy like Vander, when he's on one of his signature picks like a Rakan, not only do you have to have a very strong 2v2, which Leona can fight against Rakan, has very similar play patterns, but now IgNar, if Vander roams to the mid lane, also has some firepower that he can bring from bot into that mid lane with the ultimate.
I'm really excited to see this Leona pick. She's personally one of my favorite supports. It's interesting because depending on which support you speak to, will tell you that this matchup is either Rakan favored or it's Leona favored. Regardless, IgNar feels confident in the matchup. It's a comfort pick for him. The champion received some buffs a couple patches ago, and now she's going to be locked in with the Lucian in the bot lane. So I think it's pretty safe to say that in typical Schalke fashion, Upset and IgNar are going to be looking to find advantages in the 2 versus 2.
So much on the line for these two teams. Rogue from 0 to hero, last place in spring, 5th place in summer, now battling for a place in Athens. Schalke, after their collapse in spring, now fighting back and seeing if they can match up against Fnatic and G2 next week. For now, all I know is we have a best of 5 in our hands. I'm ready for this. This is going to be an incredible best of 5 series. Both these teams have had a week to prepare, knowing their opponents, knowing what they could bring out. And we already have some little bit spicy picks in this pick ban.
Kind of, oh, spoke too soon.
I was too ready, guys. I'm so sorry. Couldn't handle all the hype.
Looks like some quick issues from Larssen, which I'm sure will be resolved very, very quickly. In any case, it gives us an opportunity to talk about the 2 comps that we have from both these teams. The immediate thing that stands out to me for Schalke is there's a lot of teamfight presence. You immediately look at a Leona and a Sejuani and a Gnar, and you immediately look at their ultimates and you immediately go, those are pretty good in 5v5 situations. And I'd be like, yeah, Vedius, they are. And
You're
then
talking to yourself there.
it's how I communicate my thoughts. Like, great point, Vedius. I really like that one. But the Akali and Lucian, what I think is important to remember about these picks in particular is that they're not actually like, they're not the best at team fighting. They have their strengths and they have and they can work. But what I think is important for Lucian is that he finds advantages in the early game because he wants to be hitting that mid-game spike where you can leverage a lot of his mobility and early power. And for Akali, she wants to hit that gunblade. Once she has that, it becomes a lot easier for her to threaten and execute backlines. And when you have the like of a Corki and a Kaisa, these are going to be your 2 primary targets. And you'll notice that he is running the electrocute as well to assist with that burst and with that dive. So I'm expecting a lot of mid-game fights to start occurring, and for Schalke to do what they often do, which is have Trick play around the mid lane, and then use the advantages that they get in mid to actually then come bot, and then play through the duo of Upset and IgNar to try and then get this duo ahead. And
on the other side, when we look at Rogue's composition, they don't necessarily have the same 1 and 2 item power spikes, or kind of across the board that Schalke do, or the same teamfight presence, but they have incredible scaling and they have incredible access into side lane. So if this Aatrox, this Corki get to the point where they're very able to free clear waves, have that ridiculous range, just shred through opponents, I think that's where Rogue really thrives. So I'm curious of how they're going to play around the package timer, how they're going to get inspired to level 6. Maybe he can abuse getting an early level 6 over Sejuani or Trick onto the other side and try to force objectives that way. But otherwise, I think that there's a little bit more longevity from Rogue's composition when we enter into 25 to 30 minutes than Schalke's.
Yeah, which is definitely interesting to see as a bit of a skirmish happens in bot, but nothing too explosive off the back of that. Interesting that IgNar actually started with E at level 1 rather than the more conventional Q that I'm used to seeing from Leonas. But regardless, you'll notice that both junglers actually doing like full half side or full red side clears. Inspired actually is a little bit faster on the plane, not only because he is playing the Sylas, but also because he got a pull from his bot lane. Trick actually did a solo red buff and is now actually doing a full top side clear. So this to me suggests that both junglers aren't looking for anything too aggressive. They're just looking to path towards opposite sides of the map. And as I say that, Inspired is actually moving into the bot side river.
Yeah, using that priority that Woolite and Vander have created for him in the bottom, and Schalke didn't put a ward to catch this as Inspired goes around, and he's now actually setting up a trap. So we'll see if Trick, yep, there he goes, takes his back, clears topside, and then resets, walks back to his blue buff, which gives Inspired the time to steal it away.
This ward on the Razorbeaks allowing Rogue knowledge of exactly where Trick was in his jungle pathing. Inspired was looking to see if he could catch him out on his rotation to blue, but as you say, Trick backs away, and Inspired will just steal away this buff.
Yeah, and then Inspired's going to be able to cross through mid because Larssen has has the priority through Corki. He can cut behind his mid laner and secure all 3 quadrants of the jungle, 3 buffing Trick.
He can also secure himself double scuttle. So that early game ward was extremely important in allowing Rogue to already get an early game jungle advantage. Inspired should have the advantage in terms of getting an early level 6 and looking for more early game plays.
And this is something we saw against Splyce last week as well, how well Inspired was able to track his enemy jungler and actually get some advantages. And I did wonder coming into this game whether Rogue would be able to hold Schalke back in the early game. Trick has so often catapulted Schalke to an early lead, and then they've used that to play around objectives later on. But with Inspired being so good at tracking his enemy man, I think Rogue might be able to get even into the mid game.
And here's the thing, Schalke are such a telegraphed team. You know what their priority picks are going to be, you know how important a champion like Sejuani is going to be for them, and you know how they like to play the game. So this should have been a very easy series for Rogue to prepare for, and you can see that reflected in Inspired's pathing and their jungle priority.
So we can see that in terms of the lanes, things going somewhat as we expect. Finn doing pretty well in terms of the top lane, but of course there is a wave pushing towards Odoamne, so he's going to have a slight advantage as you'd expect. In the 2v2 bot, IgNar and Upset continuing to apply pressure, again as you would expect, and now we see the gank.
Trick coming in, flashing forward, Woolite caught out, but he's underneath the tower, and Trick won't be able to stay there too much longer.
And I actually want to give so much credit to Woolite and Vander here. They did a wonderful job playing weak side of the map. As soon as Inspired had transferred to the top side of the map, they got pushed in, they stayed very safe to their tower, and they forced Trick to expend his flash without giving away anything. That was the only option Trick had to make on the map since his jungle had been depleted.
My issue was that it felt like there was a bit of a communication issue there because IgNar had everything on cooldown in that play. So if Trick had made the flash knockup and the follow-up came through from IgNar, they probably could have traded summoner spells. But Woolite knew that he didn't have to. He was aware that unless IgNar follows up, I'm actually very safe in this situation. And with a good knockup from Vander, he was able to get out to safety. So a bit of miscommunication in that gank setup coming out from Schalke.
I feel you with that Boomerang crowd. I feel you.
That was so close. So close to stopping his back. And we have seen Finn greed for an extra wave after his laners come back before. So I'm sure Odoamne was hoping that the Rogue top laner stayed around.
Now we're seeing something that Inspired did multiple times last week, which is gank bot lane.
Yeah, IgNar going in, has the flash away, but the Abbedagge's going to lock onto him. The Ignite is ticking away, and first blood will go to Rogue.
Very telegraphed play coming out from the side of Rogue, and Schalke don't respect it. Great pathing from Inspired to be able to set up that gank and punish the all-in aggression from this Schalke duo. Rogue, draw first blood.
And we want to keep our eyes on if Rogue repeat this type of gank, not just because they got the flash off of IgNar, but because Rogue kind of played differently. Larssen's a very stable mid laner. He usually gets priority. He has a lot of CS, and he just creates a nice pivot point on the map. But usually Rogue will play through their bottom lane, make that a priority, whereas on the other side, Schalke like to start things in their mid lane and then swing their mid lane out to one of these side lanes.
And what's impressive about Rogue is the timing with which Inspired often makes these plays. When there is a huge stack pushing towards the enemy tower, Inspired needs to be there to cover. The reason is because when you have an all-in bot lane like Leona and Lucian, and you can't gain access to the river, there is a real risk of the jungler coming back to bot lane and trying to gank you when you're pushing that wave out and trying to get it to shove so that it will then bounce back. So Inspired was simply there to cover. He didn't bother going to his jungle camps. He didn't bother trying to do anything crazy in terms of efficiency of his jungle clear. He was very much just like, okay, I'm here for my bot lane. I'm going to help them push out. And if the enemy tries to all in, we'll punish them. He did the same thing last week against Splyce's bot lane. He's doing the same thing again against Schalke's bot lane. And it's just that great awareness from such a young jungler in Inspired to be in the right place at the right time to help his laners when they need it.
It's also great collective communication. You know, for what Rogue lack in terms of the star power that some of our other top teams like the Fnatic and the G2s have, they compensate for in their ability to work together as a team. I think that's why they've really surprised a lot of people in these playoffs. It's that they truly are the sum of their parts.
And definitely are. We do just have a brief pause, and we're getting that investigated by League officials. I'll give you an update as soon as I can, I promise. We actually have a replay of that first blood, I believe, to have a look at. So we're going to have a look at that right now. And guys, it's exactly what you were talking about. You know, Inspired was just here to cover, had been able to dodge around vision perfectly to get in towards this bottom lane.
So again, he's hit just to cover. And it's not saying that they will necessarily gank. They're aware of where all the vision is in the bot side of the map. And for IgNar to make this play, he thinks he's fine.
Yep.
He has vision in the river, he has vision in the tri-brush, he has vision everywhere. He feels like he can see everything. And from his perspective, if the jungler shows up, he can disengage. He has flash, he can get out. But because Inspired was in that one part of darkness with which he could not prepare for, they're able to punish and they're able to shut them down.
A reminder that one part of darkness on the bottom of that wall is pretty common because it used to be where you placed wards if there was a pink ward in that brush, because it's the one spot that you can't catch the wards going around that corner. So clever from Inspired, and unfortunately bad timing for IgNar.
Very intelligent stuff there from Inspired. Just as an update, we're going to get back into game. There were some reports from lag from Trick side on client side. We have restarted the client, and now we're going to go back into the game. So everything resolved there. Hopefully, Rogue 600 gold ahead. 6 minutes into this game, a CS lead in the middle lane of about 8 to 10, depending on the time. Top lane is pretty advantageous for Odoamne, as he has about a 12 to 15 CS lead.
So notice that a wave is stacking up towards the top side. IgNar is pushing mid. I thought that they would look for a potential dive, but it looks like that with Abbedagge actually going back to base, they're not going to try and set this up. This could have been an opportunity. That's why Finn is immediately disengaging. He's like, my jungler's bot side of the map. I have no vision in the top side river. I don't want to take this risk. They could dive me. But now that the wave is starting to thin out and he hasn't seen any presence, he's like, okay, I think I can now farm.
Yeah, it's a bit too delicious to pass up on. Such a big crash like that. So necessary for these top laners, especially when you don't have access to your TP.
For now, Finn will just be okay in that top lane. We have talked a lot about his game sense and sometimes his selflessness in the top lane, giving up CS to go and help out his team. I think we can see there a little bit of that game sense on display, understanding that the Sejuani could be up towards the top side.
It's funny because one of the things that we used to describe Rogue during the middle of the split was that they had fantastic instincts. And to some players that might seem weird, but for those that have played League of Legends for a long time, there'll be moments in the game where you go, I can kill this person. It's not because you know the numbers, it's not because you know like
you've done the math.
Yeah, it's just like you can just feel it. You know that it's right, you know? And like sometimes you can just feel, I think a jungler is nearby. And a lot of when you watch Rogue, it feels like that they just have a lot of these senses and instincts. So it's not like that they're meticulously calculating everything out, but it's that they are just reading the state of the map, and it feels like, okay, we have the time, we have the opportunity to make this play. And it's a very different feel from what we see from the likes of Schalke and Splice, who are very calculated and critical in their play style.
And I think it's strange to see them having such good game sense and such good feel for the game when they're actually a very inexperienced roster when it comes to the professional stage. If we look at the playoff performances for these guys, for Finn, Inspired, Larssen, Woolite, this is only their 4th ever playoff game. Vander sitting at the top of the pile with 61, the veteran support for this team. But when you compare that to a team like Schalke, the difference is actually dramatic. Look at Odoamne, 77. Trick there, winning 4 LEC titles. Abbedagge in his first playoffs, but it's such a difference for this team.
I want to point out that it's Schalke time. Schalke love monster objectives. They love level 6. It is time to make it happen.
But it's so difficult to catch out Vander. He's going to dodge away. Glacial Prism comes out, but Woolite has the cleanse, and even with the Cullen coming down, Schalke aren't able to put too much damage down on the bot lane.
So you saw it there as the teams were setting up, just kind of eyeing each other. Again, credit to Inspired. We said it was Schalke time. Schalke are a very telegraphed team. Rogue saw it coming from a mile away, and Inspired was just biding his time, waiting. He's like, I know Sejuani will come. I'm covering for my bot lane. I now have access to her ultimate. Very powerful, especially while Trix is on cooldown. Let's see what Rogue are able to leverage with this ultimate advantage.
I actually love the positioning of Woolite in that play because he face tanked Trix ultimate. He was like, I have the cleanse. I don't want to run the risk of anyone else in my lane having to like burn a flash or be in danger. So you know what? If he's going to throw out his ultimate, just throw it out onto me. Yep. Cleanse is the best spell that I can use. And like an AD carry being that selfless and just face tanking those abilities, great to see from Woolite.
Impeccable stuff from him. His EU LCS debut didn't go too well all those years ago, but he has really stepped up this split, and having Inspired and Vander by his side has helped him out a huge amount. Now Rogue are going to start up the Ocean Dragon, calling Schalke to the fight.
And again, they feel confident doing this, knowing that they have access to the Sejuani ultimate as well as a package that was picked up from Larssen there, and then with the priority. Now they're using this window because if you look at Upset, his teleport's about to come off of cooldown, and with Woolite having the cleanse, so respecting the fact that he is versus Sejuani, they need to make that play before Upset can use a TP to cheat time back up on the map.
Question sorry?
I was just going to say, great play from Rogue overall.
Yeah, it was great play from Rogue overall. I feel like my point is going to be better, but now I've hyped it up. Tell me. I just want to come back to a question that we asked in Pick and Ban, because we said, you know, Lucian, Leona is an aggressive bottom lane. They should be looking to get early leads. They want to play around these 2-3 items and get Lucian in a strong position in the mid game. Right now, it seems like Rogue are actually doing a very good job of pushing upset back on this Lucian pick.
Well, again, it comes back to what Rogue did so well against Splice, because we've now seen, I believe, 2 ganks invested towards the bot lane. We saw the initial flash burnt from Trick to try and burn some summoner spells against Woolite and Vander, and then we even saw Abbedagge roam down only a few minutes ago to attempt to play, and once again they failed. And it's just Rogue doing a great job of not only Woolite and Vander in the 2 versus 2 respecting their opposition, but also just how well the team of Rogue has been playing around them and allowing them to get through this laning phase. And this was one of the biggest question marks coming into playoffs. How well will this 2v2 handle themselves against the likes of the other playoff bot lanes? And so far, in playoffs, they've done a fantastic job.
I mean, they even got the freeze against Upset and IgNar initially in that bot lane phase. IgNar lost his flash, and so Vander and Woolite held the wave, and it helped really shore up that CS. There was a sizable discrepancy about 5 minutes ago, but now it's completely evened up.
Still a little bit of a gold lead for Rogue at the 11-minute mark, about 600 or so. A couple of plates have gone down in favor of Schalke, and Strick looking to fight here in the top lane. Vander caught up, stun locked, and they will get the first kill. Inspired's in the right place at the right time, but he is stunned down as well, and Schalke take 2.
The difference this time around is that while Inspired was in the right place at the right time, the CC combo and burst from Schalke was too much for Vander to happen. This time around, there was no cleanse body blocking. Vander didn't even have an opportunity to flash out. He was effectively locked into the ground and beaten as Schalke found themselves a kill and secured a second one off the back of Inspired trying to help them.
And this Rift Herald is actually really important for a composition like Schalke, who are that 1 item, 2 item spike. So if they can use this Herald to get a good plate gank and get one of these champions like the Lucian Akali.
They just want to kill Trick. They'll take him out. The Rift Herald falls as well. I believe it was IgNar that took it. Rogue will just fight here as Odoamne comes in, flashes forward with the Gnar, but Abbedagge is caught in the wrong place. And Rogue have welcomed Schalke to the party. They'll rip the heart out of Odoamne. Rogue fight back.
I mean, Schalke didn't expect Rogue to do that, but I guess Rogue are like, we've got the TPs, we can make the play. They did pick up the Herald. You can see that Odo has that up onto the top side of the map, but that was very messy.
Beautiful stuff, though, coming out from Rogue when we get the replay up. But I want to see how they were able to get vision on Trick being such low health. The confidence of Rogue to be able to just commit to that play when there were 2 teleports available on Schalke was just, again, great awareness to know, okay, we know we can get this execute onto Trick. So as we dive into this Alienware replay, you'll notice that here's the chain CC combo. He ends up getting locked down, and there's very little that Rogue can do about it. So jungler and support, they're dead. Now it is a 3 versus 5. There's no real reason. So it's this ward you can see just outside the Herald that gives them insight onto how low Trick is. They then just dive in to the backline. Know they can execute the jungler. Don't actually care about the Rift Herald. They probably could have last hit it, but all they were focused on was getting more kills. And now it's not a 3 versus 5. It ends up being a 3 versus 3 because the jungler's dead, the bot lane of Schalke's forced out, and now 2 members of Schalke have TP'd in into an awkward situation that they never really wanted to be in.
Yeah, and when 3 members of Schalke do no damage in a fight, you can be pretty sure it's not going to go their way. Rift Herald used in the bottom lane as Odoamne is trying to force Finn away, but here comes Inspired, locks him up. He's going to use the double bounce to try and get away, but Finn is still on the chase, and Odo should fall here. Inspired lands the chains. Inspired takes the kill. He's 3-1.
And again, think back to how many times Inspired has been right place, right time. Is now
Splashing
top
forward,
side.
looking for the solar flare. Woolite trying to put the damage down, the quickness coming out, and Vander and Woolite are doing such amazing work. Schalke overextend, and Rogue take everything from them.
Rogue went on the bot side of the map, they went on the top side of the map. That was Schalke trying to force in too many places. Rogue matched them and turned it around.
Rogue is shutting Schalke down right now. The early game was an area that I felt could have been exploited after watching last week versus Splice. It feels like Schalke came in with a similar game plan where they wanted to try and attack this bot lane specifically. But Woolite and Vander have come to play once again. They will not falter. They will not go down. Woolite sits at 4-0-2.
Whoever expected Woolite to be 4-0 in this matchup against Upset? Everyone recognizes Upset for his power, but like you said, Woolite and Vander just standing very tall today.
So the play starts with Inspired and Finn securing a kill onto Odoamne in the bot side of the map. This means that a crossplay can happen from Schalke. But look at the positioning of Larssen right now. He's lying in wait in lane and can then TP up towards to join them. But it doesn't matter because the damage is already done. They can't burst down Vander in time like they did last time. He had a beautiful two-man taunt into knockup, which means that IgNar was just tanking the tower while his duo was not doing any additional damage, allowing Rogue to come out on top and Woolite to secure all these kills.
And it's just so hard to pick your poison there. Vander's got so much mobility, so you have to burst him if you CC him. Woolite has cleanse back up, also did a great job not burning his cleanse in that attempted dive. So across the board, just expertly played.
And Rogue are going to get their second dragon of the game. 15 minutes in, they have almost a 3,000 gold lead. And Schalke are left wondering exactly how to get back in this one. They're going to take a tower in the top lane, try and close that gap just a bit.
Well, when we talked about these compositions at the very start of the game, we gave the edge to Schalke in terms of this point. This is supposed to be where, you know, they have a lot of firepower into the lanes. They should have gotten their Lucian, their Akali to that 1 to 2 item power spike, and then they should feel really confident. But because Rogue have matched them basically at every single team fight, suddenly you have a Kaisa who's 4-0, you have a Corki sitting on 4 assists, and you have Inspired who also has 3 kills. This is Rogue with a composition that should outscale being ahead where they're not supposed to be.
And when you're talking about a comp that, as you say, have those 1-item power spikes, it doesn't matter if you have 1 item. If your opponent has 1.5, has 2 items. It's such a big lead at the moment for Rogue. We'll have to see if they are able to now take the next steps to closing this one out.
The thing is, the scariest part about Rogue is actually their mid-game and the movements that they make around the map. Notice how last week, Finn was at a deficit constantly. He was always struggling and he was always behind. But now, he's actually come out ahead of his lane. He's in a very favorable position, and what we'll actually start to see is Finn grouping up with his team a lot more. He often does this thing where he'll push out only a single wave and then group up with the rest of the team. And just have a look at some of the stats from last week, rather from his summer split. You'll notice that he was often behind in CS. You can see that he often had a lot of deaths, but a lot of that was because he was a person that was targeted and he often didn't get a lot of support from his jungler. Yet, he still has a very high kill participation considering he is a top laner, and it's because he sacrifices his own lane to work with his team. So actually what he's doing right now is very different from what we saw him normally do last week, because he'd already be moving, he'd already be looking to group up with Rogue to try and get mid-prio and look for a play.
Doesn't have the teleport right now as Schalke are looking up towards this top lane. No objective really to be fought over, but they're trying to give a little bit of protection to Abbedagge on that Akali.
It feels like at this point, Woolite is so close to 2 items, and that's where Kaisa is really going to shine. So you might want to stall out the game a little bit for Rogue here. Be aware that Schalke are hunting for a fight, but when Kaisa does have access to that, that's when Rogue should feel, again, more confident to look for these engages. But right now, we're just playing around waves.
But look at how Rogue is setting up for this. Again, notice how on the minimap, you'll see that there is pressure towards the bot side of the map from Schalke, top side as well. But Rogue have collapsed in from the sides in order to group up mid and threaten this objective to make it a very easy secure.
And it makes it so easy to do that when Abbedagge and Odo are barely off of their teleport timers. You can see they're just about to tick off there, so Rogue having great awareness of keeping track of those cooldowns and knowing that Schalke wouldn't be able to collapse.
This is also just a great example of just like core fundamentals at Pro Play League, right? Noting that, sure, they lost a bit of farm in bot lane and top lane. They did not optimize the amount of CS that they were getting in this position, but the overall game was they secured a mid lane tower. What does that allow? Now they can start setting up for Baron. They can start looking for picks in the enemy jungle. It gives them more safety in being able to push out these side lanes. A short sacrifice now results in a better overall gain later on, which we're now going to be tracking Rogue and seeing how well they can set up for these next few objectives.
Feels like the easiest objectives will be the Mountain Dragon spawning in 2 minutes and that outer top tower that's still standing. Now, what Rogue need to secure to get that is it's always going to start with mid-priority. You heard Deficio say it on desk, you hear us say it all the time in the cast. Just watch how often Rogue will take care of this lane as the first thing and then rotate to side lanes.
Also, the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the current positioning of Inspired. Notice how he's standing at the bottom side of his map right now. Now, yes, Krugs normally spawn, but what he'll do is he'll regularly sneak into where his top laner is and hope that the enemy top laner is overextending. If he can find a kill, then that's great. It allows them to rotate up, but all he's often doing is providing safety and support. While he chose not to go for the play this time, it's something worth tracking, as this is something that Inspired loves to do at around this point in the game.
You can see Trick trying to do a very similar thing in the top lane, hoping that Larssen overextends a bit, but Larssen playing incredibly safe, backing away, has that ward around the blue buff so he'll know if Trick's in the area, and he realizes his job isn't to take that tower right now. His job is just to keep those waves pushing away, keep Abbedagge from getting up towards the tower, and allow the rest of Rogue to play in the mid lane.
But frankly, what Schalke are doing is they're not trying to lure Larssen out. Yeah, Larssen has good sense to recognize that Schalke might be hunting for him, but Abba's actually just feeding him free waves into this Corki, which is going to be devastating at 2 items. Already has access to his Trinity Force, is only going to continue to scale into this game. I actually think Schalke are making the wrong call by giving Larssen a free farm lane.
Yeah, so now we have those 2 items finished on Woolite and the Mountain Dragon coming up in 30 seconds. You can see Larsen's just picked up his package. I expect that we'll see Rogue trying to set up around this next objective, and knowing Schalke, they'll want to take the fight.
Oh, they certainly will. Schalke, last week against Vitality, a lot of their fights often happened around the mid lane. There was no real focus towards why they were fighting, they just kind of happened. But that is partly what happens when you end up fighting against Vitality. Rogue, a lot more controlled in where they choose to fight. And with the setup that they have around Drake, it will be very difficult for Schalke to challenge this. And it looks like that they're going to disengage and not run the risk.
Yeah, it's way too dangerous, not only because of the waves on the map and the state of the map itself, but also the fact that Odo was in Mega Gnar form. You can see that he's now just ticked back over to Mini Gnar, so they also didn't have their top laner prepped and ready to go if they wanted to find that big 5v5. But that's double Mountain on top of a Kaisa who's already so far ahead. Rogue's composition is going to start sprinting ahead of Schalke's at this point, and Baron now becomes a huge threat. Schalke have to make sure it is constantly warded.
Especially when you have a Corki there beside you, you can shred through that Baron incredibly quickly. You can take the towers very quickly as well. And Rogue continue with that 3,000 gold lead, 2,500 right now. It's not extending, but it's not getting closed by Schalke either.
Now we think about next few steps, what's going to be happening within the next few minutes, and I think Baron is going to be the big point of contention. One of the things that Schalke do actually have going for them is the fact that there is this tower in the top lane still alive. This actually gives a lot more freedom for the Akali to continuously push this wave because of how much safety Abbedagge actually has. So Rogue, if they want to be contesting this Baron, they need to find a way to secure this objective, and right now Schalke are making it difficult for them because they're setting up a lot of defensive vision towards the top side of the map to, again, keeping Abbedagge pushing out this wave and getting information of when Rogue try to invade.
You can see tomorrow G2 face up against Fnatic. The loser of that will play the winner of this game in our semi-finals match next Saturday in Athens. I do want to stress how important as well this game is for both these teams. If you lose this, you are out of Worlds contention. There's no gauntlet, there's no rest of 2019 for you. You wait until 2020 before you play any more competitive league. And both the teams have come back fighting from spring splits that were disappointing and will want to make their mark on the world stage.
Paying attention to what's happening on the map right now, though, Vedius, you called it, Inspired, was kind of checking around that bot lane on Finn before cutting back mid, and they're forcing the engage.
Just goes straight in, upsets all by himself, and IgNar and Trick were on the side. The solar flare coming out, but the tower isn't doing any damage anymore. Abbedagge is locked down, and it's already Woolite who has fallen. And now we'll see if Rogue can disengage, because Schalke are on the hunt. Abbedagge trying to chase in here, IgNar going forward as well. Larssen flashes away, but still gets locked up. The blast goes there for them. They'll try and get there. Finn coming in from the side, and it's an all-right brawl in the jungle as Trick falls, goes golden for the moment. Abbedagge trying to do what he can from the side, but Trick has already fallen, and now it's a 4v2, 4v1, 4v1 still as Odoamne just about escapes, but in the end it's a 4v9. Rogue take it all and they turn their eyes to Nashor.
And they don't have their Kaisa, but they do have their very fed Corki now. Double Mountain. This is going to be a free objective for Rogue.
Rogue will secure themselves the Baron. They don't need that clever, fancy-pantsy macro stuff. They're just going to dive mid. They're going to find a kill onto Upset, and they're going to convert it into a team fight. Schalke saw that as their best opportunity to get back into the game, and a large part of it, as we get into this Anywhere replay, will be because of the fact that they end up trading AD carries. So you can see, this is an easy pick for Rogue, but the problem for Woolite is he's kind of stuck in an awkward spot because the 2 teleports are coming right in front of his face. So he's like, nah, you know what, I'll try and get some turret damage down. But now you can see that Rogue is divided. So Schalke think, we can collapse onto their backline. Unfortunately for them, Finn dives over the wall and divides Schalke. This means that the front line disappears. Abbedagge is the only damage dealer, and unfortunately, he is just not enough to be able to take out the likes of Larssen, and Vander does not even drop at the back of that fight, allowing Larssen to walk away with a triple kill.
So let's see how much that has accelerated Rogue into the lead. They now have a 6,000 gold lead. They've got 2.5 minutes left on the Baron buff. In terms of items, they are sitting very, very pretty. As you have Trinity Force, Essence Reaver complete on the Corki. You've got Storm Razor, Ginsu's complete on the Kaisa. They are looking incredibly strong.
You're in crisis mode if you're Schalke. You can see that they're on the hunt. They're trying to find these flanks. But Rogue, heads up, they know. They have vision that covers their bottom. They know that the only play that Schalke have available is to try to force hard engage onto them. And so they just smartly cheat up into the top side jungle and create space for Finn to take the top tower.
Rogue so far playing this very cleanly with the advantage that they have, and they did a very similar thing when they played up against Splice last week in what was a surprisingly quick series. But notice how our fastest game in LEC history was G2 versus OG. The second fastest series, Rogue versus Splice from last week. Look at how their average game time was around 27 minutes, and we're about to hit that benchmark. They still have a minute and a half left on the Baron, and they are not looking to slow down.
Rogue speedran it last week, 6 minutes slower, but now the fight begins as Schalke going in. Abbedagge trying to get onto Inspired, but Abbedagge's almost fallen. Woolite still alive, and here comes Finn from the side. Trick caught in no man's land. Rogue strike back. 2 for them, and now they're looking for that inhib tower.
Expertly played by Inspired right there. Great use of the stopwatch. Then hits the fadeaway ult on Schalke there to allow Rogue to turn that play around and start marching up towards this inhib.
This could just be it. A team with 3 rookies on their lineup has really decimated Schalke in this game. They're on the Nexus towers and Schalke just can't defend. The Cinderella story is continuing here for Rogue as they take game 1 versus Schalke.
Excellent game from Rogue. They controlled the early game beautifully. They prevented Schalke from being able to snowball this Lucian Leona lane. Odoamne wasn't able to get significant advantages in the top side. Trick was unable to find many ganks. And the one gank that they did find ended up collapsing, because as they played for the Rift Herald, Rogue was able to get that collapse, and then Woolite found himself with 4 kills. And so what was the difficult part of the game, the early game, allowing Rogue to then transition into the mid game, the moment Schalke made the smallest of mistakes, which was upset just being alone underneath the tier 2 tower, they pounce. And this again just reinforces how Rogue are so good in their mid game, and then they translate it into very efficient, clean, quick game-winning games.
Which is why when you look at Schalke's composition, it makes sense that they also recognize the strengths of Rogue. They're like, let's take champions that really excel into the lane phase, that have really excellent team fighting when they're grouped up into that mid game, 1 item, 2 item power spikes. Unfortunately, the fights that Schalke picked were just the wrong fights. Rogue just played them out better, and I think that's where you have to have a bit of an emergency for Schalke. They got basically all of their comfort picks that they wanted, and maybe you can retool a couple of things like that Lucian pick, but I don't know. This is really concerning if you're a Schalke fan.
And really encouraging if you're a Rogue fan. Seeing them do what they did to Splice again to Schalke in game 1 here is absolutely incredible stuff. And I think a lot of people will have looked at that game and say, is this another Rogue 3-0 on the cards?
Well, I mean, that's the question, right? Because when we looked at Schalke last week, one of the big questions I had last week was, okay, do I think that Schalke have a higher ceiling than what they showcased against Vitality? And I believe that they did. I felt like that they would come in today and they would not be as sloppy or as messy as they were against Vitality. And to be fair, I felt like their early game planning was good. I felt like that the idea behind their execution was strong, but the problem was Rogue was there to match it. And at what point do you have to sit there and say Rogue is a top 3 team in the LEC? I suppose it's 2 more wins.
Yeah, if they get 2 more wins, I'm saying they're a top 3 team.
But like, it's just, last week, after the first win that they had against Splice, I was asking, okay, was this Splice playing poorly, or was this Rogue playing well? And in my opinion, it was more so Splice playing poorly. But then game 2 happened, and it was fantastic from Rogue, and then they stomped them again in game 3. And Rogue just continue this level of performance, and it is exceptional to see from such a young squad.
Incredible stuff from Rogue. Disappointing so far for Schalke, but we'll see if they can bounce back in game 2. For now, we got to hand it back across towards the analyst desk.
Thank you very much. You said it already, Medic. The Cinderella story, the underdog story continues, and I think it's about high time we stop calling them Cinderellas or underdogs because they keep performing. We talked so much about momentum and about decisiveness, and this Rogue hasn't dropped a beat since last week.
No, they play exactly the same way as they did against Splice, and that's why when we look at this Rogue lineup and we look at the last couple of games of regular season, we look at the series against Splice, we picked him to beat Schalke in our predictions because we actually see a team who's not relying on random lucky things or one member who has a 1v9 performance. It's actually really solid macro they're playing. And they punish teams who skip steps, like Schalke.
And you especially wanted to take a look at one of these early replays of the Rift Herald, because you told me when you saw this, Schalke always goes for the Rift Herald at this point in time, and Rogue has done their homework.
Yeah, Schalke always want to contest Rift Herald, but that's one of the things that Rogue actually did very well against Spice too. They were ready for these early fights. They had compositions that could take team fights, they could deny you from actually getting big advantages by going for early Herald. Abbedagge in this one specifically is completely out of position, but I'm actually ends up kind of jumping away from him with the Mega Gnar. And from here on out, the thing about Rogue is, once they get a lead, it's the same against Splice. They don't just throw it away by doing something dumb. Like in Spite is actually very smart at reading the map and understanding where he's supposed to go to get a bigger advantage.
And this isn't a new thing. Actually, when we look at their regular season in summer, it's very deterministic in terms of if they get a lead at 15 minutes, they're most likely going to keep pushing. It's good that that identity has only become stronger.
Yeah, exactly. And this replay we just had here in the end is an example of greed and kind of skipping a step for Schalke. They're calling with 3 members top. They're 2. We can go for a dive because Abbedagge is moving. They're skipping the fact that there's a TP available on Corki, so he will be there first. So the reaction comes in instantly from Corki, Abbedagge is not there, and then it quickly becomes a 3v3 under a turret, and Vander, of course, played that very well on the Rakan, but it's what they've been doing for a lot of games now. They're actually ready, they're reading, oh, they're 3-man top, that's the strong side of the enemy team, don't worry, we have TP mid. If they go for you, fight.
Yeah.
And then boom, it instantly TP comes in.
Absolute decisiveness from the side of Rogue, and Inspired, he was a factor in this team fights, but he did so much work in the early game. So a big part of Rogue's lead came from Inspired's work early in the jungle, and Ender's going to break it down for us.
Thanks so much, Shocks. I wanted to take a look at Rogue's early game coordination because they came in here with a very clear plan in how to get Inspired ahead and to set up for an early gank. Now, when we watched this, you know, the start of the early game here, everything looked normal here for the side of Rogue. Inspired is just going for his 3-camp clear, but here's the big difference. This ward goes down from Larssen very early on because he has the Corki into the Akali matchup. With that range, you can push on in early and set up for a play. So as we go forward, we notice on the other side of the map, Sejuani going for a very similar clear, and now Trick is going to be spotted out on those very same Raptors. So, Inspired, after clearing all 3 of his camps, decides he's going to walk inside of the enemy jungle because he knows where that Sejuani is. Moving forward, he actually sees a recall go through from Trick, which means his bottom lane is allowed to make that push-up happen in the bottom lane. They walk on over and take away the blue buff from Trick. Coming out of that play, it seems like everything's going well for Inspired. He's able to take the bot side Scuttle Crab, can then go up towards the top side of the map and take that as well. But now Trick, he's sort of stuck with nothing to do because the second he takes down his wolf camp, well, there's no camps for him to take. So the only play he has to gank either mid lane or bottom lane. And honestly, neither of them look like very good options at the moment. Trick seems lost for the time being because 4 minutes 30 seconds is the time when both Krug camps are going to be respawning. Instead, he overforces a gank in the bottom lane, burns his flash instead of trying to trade and invade on that enemy Krug camp. At the same time, Inspire is able to go up topside, clear his own blue buff, clear the Scuttle Crab, but we'll notice that he doesn't actually stick around to clear a couple of his extra camps on the top side. You see his Gromp camp and his Wolves are up. That is for 2 reasons. A, because his Krugs have just respawned, and B, because the bottom lane is now vulnerable for Schalke. He's able to sneak into this bottom lane, avoid vision from the side of Schalke, and with his low HP Woolite, they bait the engage there from IgNar. IgNar forces in with the Zenith Blade and ends up getting taken down. This is just the start to Inspired's very strong, very calm game where he's able to get many kills, get a lead, and knock Schalke out in this first match. Now let's head back to Shocks and Officio for more on that game 1.
Thank you so much. Wonderful breakdown, because one of those things that you really need to look at to see which steps Inspired or any jungler for that matter is taking to shut down the enemy jungler, and it just snowballed into the rest of the game.
Yeah, especially against Schalke, who relies so much on Trick in the early game to do anything. We talked about this in the pre-game. If you look at the laners of Schalke, the solo laners will not gain big advantages on their own. Bot lane tried with the Leona pick in this one specifically, but if you don't have a jungler around, you can't all in, because if enemy junglers there or TPs are available, you just die. So I think when Inspired gets this kind of good start, and he already is on Sylas, which is great against the Sejuani, it becomes really difficult for Schalke to actually play out the game, at least early on, other than just saying, Herald, go 5-man and fight it, I guess.
This is interesting to me because Schalke was our 4th best team and has played Rogue. They lost to them in week 8. But isn't there a factor of why haven't other teams figured that out versus Schalke? And what is it about Rogue that they are able to do it that fast and that efficient all of a sudden coming into playoffs for both Splice and Schalke?
Yeah, I actually think Rogue is one of the most improved teams when it comes to just learning the fundamentals of macro, of the game itself. Reactions to what the enemy team can do on strong side, weak side. So again, enemy team has 3 members top side. You only have 1. They're able to understand, okay, we should attack the other side of the map and our top laner should walk away. Or can we react with double TP play and like counter it? These kind of things, that's just one example, are things they're doing extremely well right now. And they like the slower pace. They don't need 24 fights everywhere. They don't need solo kills in their lanes. Yeah, exactly. And I think when I look at the draft as well, red side that was picked by Schalke gained them 0 advantages. I don't like just blaming draft for losses, but if we look at what they got, Akali has not proven in the last couple of games to be a good pick against Rogue because they're not taking scrappy fights. Akali's not getting into these early skirmishes where she gets 1 or 2 kills, she starts snowballing with a gunblade. No, actually, they pick Corki into it every time, and they farm the mid lane. They don't take a lot of stupid fights around, so Akali never gets going. And then the second one is the Sejuani pick. Well, then Sylas comes in on the other side. You now have Corki, Aatrox, Sylas. Top side is completely covered for Rogue. Schalke can't snowball.
And exactly, they also do so well in the mid lane. As you say, the Corki can keep that Akali down. We talked so much about Larssen and Inspired before. Take a look at this next replay. The game was already over, let's be clear. But here, Corki just puts the cherry on the cake and gets a triple kill. And once again, we're getting tired of saying it, but in the same vein, it's also very exciting. These rookies and Larssen, led by Vander, just keep going in.
Yep, and it's a classic full mid lane control from Rogue. They commit multiple members to gain the control, push in, they catch out Upset here, who can't flash away in time. And then when you have Corki against Akali, and Corki gets out of the laning phase with a bunch of farm, he has 1 or 2 items already, he will just be an amazing team fighter. And Abbedagge is trying to assassinate the backline, but it's really hard for him to do anything on his own.
Round 1 goes to Larssen and goes to Rogue. Just one thing before we move on to the break. You said, I want to see Schalke on the other side. They get to choose because they lost the first game. They are back on red.
Interesting. I think actually it's not necessarily a bad choice, but I think the way the first 3 picks on each side went, you need to change that if you're Schalke. You getting Akali, giving them Corki, Aatrox, Sylas, not worth it.
We'll see what happens. Larssen had a fantastic game 1, and the amazing story of Rogue continues as the surprise team is 2 wins away from Athens. We'll be right back for the next game.